Good evening and welcome to the City of Somerville Zoning Board of Appeals meeting for May 17th, 2023. Our board members present tonight are Ann Brockelman, our vice chair, Zach Zaremba, Brian Cook, Cecia Dagland, and I am Susan Fontano. We have our statement we have to make here for you pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the Somerville Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted via remote participation. The recording of these proceedings can be accessed at any time using the registration link at the top of this agenda. Tonight, we have under general business, approval of minutes from February 15th and March 1st, 2023. Would the vice chair filling in for the clerk this evening, please make a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair, can I do them both at the same time?
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of the February 15th, 2023 and March 1st, 2023 as submitted.
Perfect. May I have a second, please, from the motion from the acting clerk? Thank you. Brian Cook. All in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please say yay as I go around. Brian Cook.
Yay.
Zachary Zaremba.
Yay.
Cecia Daglian.
Yay.
Ann Brockelman.
Yay.
And Susan Fontano. Yay. Let the record show it was unanimous. All 5 members voting in the affirmative. And the next thing on the agenda is our public hearing, which is 21 Francesca Ave. That's P&Z 23-001. This case was continued from May 3rd, 2023. Is the applicant ready to speak?
Yes, Madam Chair, Adam Dash. I have my camera button, and do I have a share screen button as well? I'm hearing some background garble. Are you hearing me okay?
Right now, yes.
Okay, good.
There's your people. One question I want to just ask, Ms. White, did you have something you were going to say? You saw your hand coming up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I think I was just moving.
Okay.
I was talking with my
cool.
hands.
That's right. Just want to make sure. Thank you so much. Welcome, Mr. Dash.
Good
Welcome,
evening.
Mr. Zepeda.
Yes, Adam Dash, representing the applicants, 48 Grove Street in Somerville, representing Manuel Zepeda and Catherine Jong, trustees of the applicant and owner trusts. This also is Mark Maxwell, the architect. Can I share my screen again like last time? I don't have a button
That'd
for
be
that.
great. Yep.
One moment, I'm sorry. This is Emily Hutchings. I will make you a presenter.
Thank you.
Mr. Dash.
In the meantime, we were before you on May 3rd with this administrative appeal, but as Ann Fullerton recused herself, the matter was continued to tonight. I was asked to make the applicant's presentation again tonight, which I will now do. So, all right, I am sharing my screen. Can you see that?
Yes.
Fantastic. So this is an administrative appeal, the December 16th, 2022 determination by Inspectional Services that the pre-existing, long-standing historic carriage house, which you see the front of right here in the picture, in the rear of the property at 21 through 23 Francesca Avenue is not a backyard cottage, but rather is an outbuilding. Manuel and Catherine contend that the carriage house is a backyard cottage, and if not, it can be converted into a backyard cottage. You can see here, there's the front. There is one of the sides. That's the right side. Or maybe that's the back. The other one was the back. Sorry, that's the back. That's the, looks like the left side. And there's another side. These little windows here are for the horses, for the horse stalls that were in there, so the little horses could look out the window. As you can see, it retains the historic features. Obviously, the roll-up door replaced probably what was another door there at one time. So this appeal arose out of Manuel and Catherine's application to take one of the 2 existing units out of the main house of the property and move it into this carriage house to provide more space for their growing family. Here is a rendering showing what the property looks like. Francesca Avenue at the bottom. You've got the house, which is currently a 2-family, and you've got the back carriage house. The idea is they're going to take one of the units out of the main house and put it in the carriage house. So then you will have a single family house in the back and you'll have a backyard cottage unit in the rear. So that's the plan. They're not going to change the carriage house other than to, as you can see, there's some skylights and windows and such. But other than that, that's not going to be anything like changed in any dimensional capacity. The carriage house is very old, and Manuel and Catherine are not proposing to make the dimensional changes to it. They just want to renovate it, historically preserve it rather than demolish it. No new units will be created. No new nonconformities will be created. No existing nonconformities will be increased. I want to tell you how we got here because I'm not sure that the board knows what's been happening and what Manuel and Catherine have been told in the past by the city, which is relevant, as you will see later. This is all spelled out in my brief, but I will walk you through it. Manuel and Catherine have been at this simple project for 2.5 years, since December 2020, and they've been run around in circles worse than I think I've ever seen a project like this get run around. December 2020, Manuel and Catherine proposed the project to PP&Z Department, Preservation Planning and Zoning. March 2nd of 2021, PP&Z said they could convert to a backyard cottage by site plan approval. Manuel and Catherine decided to go ahead with this, although their contention is it already was a backyard cottage. March 22nd, 2022, this is about 3 weeks later, Manuel and Catherine filed for a certificate of zoning compliance to do that, which was the process at the time. July 2021, which is 4 months later, Manuel and Catherine have a pre-submittal meeting and are told they need a site plan approval with 2 neighborhood meetings, Urban Design Commission meeting, and the Zoning Board of Appeals. So they embarked upon that process with me. November 30th, 2021, we had neighborhood meeting number 1. March 8th, 2022, we went to the Urban Design Commission. I have never seen them dispose of something in one meeting with no conditions, and they actually asked why we were bothering them with this project. They had no problem with it. March 30th, 2022, we had our second required neighborhood meeting to show the neighbors that nothing had changed. That's the process, but it was kind of a not terribly necessary meeting, except we checked the box. June 24th, 2022, the development review application, or the DRA, was filed for the site plan approval for this. No special permit was required because the carriage house was a pre-existing, non-conforming, permitted building type in the NR zone, and no new nonconformity was being created and no existing nonconformity was being increased. On September 22nd, 2022, this was 3 months later, we were on for a Zoning Board of Appeals agenda. However, 2 weeks before that, on September 8th, 2022, the City Council amended the zoning ordinance to make backyard cottages in the NR zone and some other zones by right. The city then said that no site plan approval was needed, and this matter was removed from your agenda of September 21st, and we never saw you until the most recent meeting. At that point, Manuel and Catherine filed for a building permit to make the pre-existing non-conforming carriage house into living space by right. December 16th, 2022, the building permit was denied because Inspectional Service said you cannot convert to a backyard cottage without compliance with all of the dimensional requirements. January 4th, 2023, they filed this administrative appeal of that decision, and we are here. Keep in mind that Manuel and Catherine were told on March 2nd, 2021, they could convert the carriage house into a backyard cottage by site plan approval. There was no mention of needing full dimensional compliance with the backyard cottage requirements for this being a pre-existing non-conforming structure. Why the sudden change in the city's position? Had Manuel and Catherine been told back on March 21st of 2021 that they had to comply with all the dimensional requirements, they would have saved a lot of time and money that has been spent between now and then. Manuel and Catherine argue that either one, the carriage house has always been a backyard cottage and there's no conversion requirement needed, or two, they can convert it into a backyard cottage as a pre-existing non-conforming structure with no changes in nonconformity and no new nonconformities created. Either way, backyard cottage building type is allowed by right in the NR zone, which is where this is, and the rationale behind this appeal is the same. Inspectional Services December 16th, 2022 determination, which is being appealed now, asked Manuel and Catherine to redesign the carriage house to comply with all dimensional requirements of the backyard cottage in the NR zone, or else file this appeal. Manuel and Catherine filed this appeal. And because in order to make the alterations that Inspectional Services required would destroy the historic character of the carriage house, and which was the whole point of Manuel and Catherine's project. They would have been better off demolishing the carriage house and building something new at that point, but they're here tonight with the administrative appeal because they want to retain this historic carriage house, and so we filed the administrative appeal as suggested by Inspectional Services. Be clear that this appeal tonight and the board's vote on it will have deep repercussions on all barns and carriage houses in this city, most of which do not meet backyard cottage or any building type dimensional requirements. As you know, the vast majority of these seem to be built on lot lines, and they tend, in this case, this tends to be extremely large structure. Finding against this appeal would mean that such structures like this will have to be demolished because of their pre-existing non-conforming status. This runs counter to the intent of the Somerville zoning ordinance, the Summer Vision 2040 strategic plan, and Mass General Laws Chapter 40A, which is the zoning enabling statute. The intent of the Somerville zoning ordinance is stated in section 1.1.4, and I'll read you several parts in 1.1.4. A1, to implement the comprehensive plan of the city of Somerville and to enforce officially adopted plans and policies. B1, to equitably balance the regulation of real property with the interests of the community as a whole. That's a big one that we're going to be talking about tonight. To that equitable balance between regulation of real property and what's best for the community. C4, to protect the social, environmental, and economic benefits provided by a walkable development pattern. D1, to develop and maintain complete mixed-use, walkable, transit-oriented, and environmentally sustainable neighborhoods that foster a strong sense of community throughout the city. Being forced to demolish an entire structure like this and rebuild it is a complete environmental waste of the materials that are in this structure. To provide distinct physical habitats at different scales, including the lot, block, and neighborhood, so that meaningful choices and living arrangements can be provided to residents with differing physical, social, and emotional needs. Again, Manuel and Catherine are trying to accommodate a growing family without having to leave the city. D3, to provide a range of housing types, unit sizes, and price points to accommodate the diverse household sizes and life stages of Somerville residents at all income levels. That's what you're seeing here. And lastly, and I'd say most importantly, D5, to preserve and enhance the existing character of Somerville's traditional housing and respect existing built form and development patterns. That's what we're asking for tonight, to respect the existing built form that you see, enhance the character of Somerville's traditional housing. That's what we're talking about. If this appeal is denied, then I don't know what section 1.1.4 even means. Most pre-existing carriage houses and barns cannot and will not meet all dimensional requirements of a backyard cottage. The whole point of the backyard cottage in the zoning ordinance was to provide an avenue for these structures to be preserved and used. The city council then went even further last fall by making them by right. Inspectional Services position requiring a structure to comply with all dimensional requirements of a backyard cottage would mean that none of these carriage houses and barns would be backyard cottages because very few of them would comply. If that is true, then they would have to be demolished in favor of dimensionally compliant backyard cottage structures, which would deprive the city of these historical structures and undo the whole point of the backyard cottage concept and the intent of the zoning ordinance to respect the existing building form. Manuel and Catherine's carriage house is now and has always been a backyard cottage. There is no other building type which it matches. The staff report would have you believe that this carriage house is an accessory structure. Again, let me go back to the picture. I mean, you look at that carriage house and you tell me if any of the permitted accessory structures that are listed in the zoning ordinance look like this carriage house. And this is section 10.2. I will read them to you. These are accessory structures. Listen to the class of buildings we're talking about. amateur radio equipment, apiary, arbor or trellis, carport, chicken coop, cold frame, compost bin, construction trailer or office, donation box, electrical vehicle charging station, farm stand, greenhouse, hoop house, market stand, outbuilding, pergola, pool or hot tub, real estate trailer, satellite dish, shed, solar collector, and temporary shelter. Clearly, this carriage house is not that class of structures. This carriage house does not meet all of the dimensional requirements of the accessory structures either, as stated in the staff report on page 4. I would note that the definition of outbuilding and the definition of backyard, which is one of those accessory structures, and the definition of backyard cottage are essentially the same. And this structure, our carriage house here, does not meet the dimensional requirements of either of them. If you take a look at the zoning ordinance, I have up here 3.1.12 backyard cottage. You can see pictures of a backyard cottage. Looks an awful lot like what we're talking about now, doesn't it? I would note here that a backyard cottage is defined as a small floor plate, detached accessory building type, typically providing space for one small dwelling unit, a home occupation, a playhouse for children, or vehicular parking on the same lot as a principal building type. Now, an outbuilding is a freestanding, fully enclosed structure used for accessory vehicle parking, home occupation, or as ancillary space for residential principal use, including but not limited to a playroom for children. So you basically, both of these definitions have dwelling unit, playroom for children, parking, home occupation. I fail to see the difference in the definition between outbuilding and backyard cottage, both of which in the code set out various dimensional requirements that this carriage house in our case does not meet in either case. It is and has always been a pre-existing non-conforming backyard cottage, as I said. Per section 3.1.12, I've read to you the backyard cottage definition. Just because it's pre-existing and non-conforming doesn't mean it's not a backyard cottage with its non-conformities grandfathered. Even if the staff report at the bottom of page 3, even there it admits that any existing building might present some non-conformities for the building type for which it is customarily classified, currently classified. Right? This is the most logical, common sense, equitable conclusion here is that this is a backyard cottage. It is the only conclusion which satisfies the intent of the Somerville zoning ordinance and Summer Vision 2040. According to Summer Vision 2040, the Summer Vision 2040 map illustrates our vision for the community to conserve our great residential neighborhoods, enhance our funky square and commercial corridors, and transform opportunity areas in the eastern and southern edges. This is the conservation of our great neighborhoods part. Summer Vision 2040's goals regarding climate and sustainability can be met by retaining the existing structures rather than raising them and building new structures, thereby wasting building materials while squandering the embedded energy from constructing and maintaining these pre-existing structures. To quote sections of Summer Vision 2040, which again, the intent of the zoning ordinance said to comply with the comprehensive plan, we need to integrate sustainability in all city processes, especially the way we live and move about. Our infrastructure plays a critical role in improving our sustainability and resiliency to future climate events. We should explore traditional and innovative ways of addressing our problems. Evaluate waste streams, including trash, recycling, and organic waste, which I would include construction waste. Our housing stock needs to be ready for the 21st century. Low energy, resilient, healthy, and comfortable. To meet these goals, the majority of houses in Somerville need significant renovation. Therefore, this goal needs thoughtful consideration to avoid the negative impacts associated with gut renovations. We are seeking to renovate this, not to tear it down. The best way to achieve these goals is to allow property owners to adapt their existing structures for productive uses, which is what the applicants are seeking to do by turning this carriage house into living space. This conclusion also complies with Chapter 40A in Somerville Zoning Ordinance Section 14.15, whether one says the carriage house is now a backyard cottage or is converted into one. Chapter 40A and the Somerville Zoning Ordinance allow non-conforming structures to be altered, whether a principal building type, accessory building type, or as ISD would have it, an accessory structure. Modifications, any modification to a permitted principal building type, building component, or accessory building type that is non-conforming to any standard for that specific principal building type, building component, or accessory building type is permitted subject to the following. A, the creation of any new nonconformity is prohibited. We're not creating one. B, any increase in existing nonconformity is prohibited. We're not doing that either. Manuel and Catherine have a permitted building type, which is dimensionally grandfathered. Therefore, their proposal to make it a dwelling unit is by right. That is the only logical, equitable conclusion which meets with the intent of the law. If this board denies the appeal, Manuel and Catherine will be forced to demolish this carriage house to carry out their project. How does that further any city policy? I would raise an additional problem with this is that the city's demolition review ordinance, which imposes an 18-month delay on demolishing significant, preferably preserved structures, which this would likely be based upon my prior appearances before the Historic Preservation Commission. In fact, altering more than 50% of the exterior surface area of the carriage house would trigger the 18-month delay on top of the 2.5-year process Manuel and Catherine have been in since 2020. I should note that the staff report does not address the historic aspect of this project at all. Look, Manuel and Catherine just want to save this carriage house and stay in Somerville with their growing family. It sounds so simple and good. The city's position being appealed here is a triumph of bureaucracy over common sense. Interestingly, the staff report in this case makes no recommendation on how the Zoning Board of Appeals should vote on this. So you're free to make your own decision here. I'm here to ask that this board now set things straight, and for future projects that we want to preserve and retain historic carriage houses and barns by allowing them to be backyard cottages, even with their pre-existing nonconformities. If people want to create new nonconformities or increase existing nonconformities with them, that's different, but that's not the case here. If this appeal is not upheld, then I don't know what the point of the backyard cottage even is. This carriage house is a pre-existing, non-conforming backyard cottage now. It's all it really could be while meeting the language of the zoning ordinance and SummerVision. Finding in favor of this appeal does not make anyone in the city a bad person. We're just having a discussion. Taking all this into account, Manuel and Catherine ask that you find in their favor and allow them to restore and preserve their carriage house. I would note that Marcy Campbell has sent 2 emails of support. I don't know if you saw them, but I do want to put them into the record. There was one on May 3rd, where she said, I attended the ZBA meeting the evening of May 3rd to support an administrative appeal of the carriage house at 21 to 23 Francesca Avenue. Upon receiving this notice as an abutter, I was surprised that the owners were being asked to justify the designation of the carriage house to be a backyard cottage, given that it is an existing non-conforming building. I understand the planning department's desire to adhere to the zoning code. However, the designation by the building inspector would limit that use, and I find it short-sighted for many of the reasons you outlined in your presentation. My daughter is graduating from college in New York City the day of the next zoning board meeting, which I believe she means tonight, and I would like to send a note in support in my absence. In the past, I've sent notes in support, and sometimes with critique, developments in Davis and Ball Squares to the planning department, but have never received confirmation or acknowledgement of those notes. What is the best way to deliver a note to be sure it's received and recorded? I have lived on Francesca Avenue since 1997. I knew the previous owner of the house, attended all of the neighborhood meetings for the current owners, voiced my support, and find what the city is requiring to be beyond what any resident should be required to do. Particularly in this case where they are supporting the philosophy of the new zoning code for backyard cottages and preserving and utilizing a beautiful existing building. I was also in attendance for city meetings creating the new zoning code, so I'm bewildered by this current process. Thank you. Marcy Campbell, legal name is Martha on the deed for our house. She also wrote on May 14th to Zoning Board, we write as neighbors and residents of Francesca Avenue for nearly 30 years. We attended the zoning code overhaul meetings and heard the planning department staff talk frequently about backyard cottages and reducing hurdles for residents to add them. As we understood it from presentations given by the planning department staff, the introduction of backyard cottages are a way to further increase density and add housing to a city experiencing a shortage. With that knowledge, it has been especially surprising to follow the journey of the owners of 21 to 23 Francesca Avenue to convert an existing building into a backyard cottage. We've attended 2 neighborhood meetings and no one has expressed anything but support. The structure they wish to convert to a backyard cottage is an existing carriage house that still has horse stalls in it. It is a beautiful building and is admirable the owners wish to keep it. It preserves the character of the neighborhood, adds housing to the city, and makes use of an existing building. To refuse to acknowledge it as a backyard cottage would set a dangerous precedent, which would result in the demolition of numerous historic structures and degrade the character of Somerville. We attended the ZBA meeting 2 weeks ago where one ZBA member had to recuse themselves from discussion of this property. We are unable to attend May 17th. Please consider this email our voice in support of a backyard cottage at 21 to 23 Francesca Avenue. Thank you for your consideration, Martha, Marcy, and Ross Lindy Campbell, 36 Francesca Avenue. So the outcome here is simple, but the wide implications of saying that every pre-existing non-conforming carriage house has to meet every dimensional requirement of a backyard cottage, or else it's not a backyard cottage, even if it also doesn't meet all the dimensional requirements of an accessory structure, will be huge. Please help Manuel and Catherine stay in the city. Please help Manuel and Catherine preserve our historic resources. Please help residents do sustainable projects, and please overturn the December 16th, 22 ISD decision. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adam. Okay, December. Okay. All right. Now, we left the public portion open to this case. If I'd ask our staff planner to see if there's anybody there that would like to speak to this case.
Madam Chair, this is Emily Hutchings, one of the planners for planning and zoning. I do see at least one hand raised. With your permission, I will unmute him. This is Meredith Porter, who is our first speaker. Mr. Porter, I have unmuted you. You may be muted on your end and will need to unmute before you speak.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. Meredith Porter, 104 Josephine Ave. I have a few thoughts on this case. I'm thinking also of the case that you heard last week, which was 45 Troll Street, where you received advice from Attorney Shapiro that in these classifications that you should really be considering only what the appropriate classification of a building is and not other considerations. So I know also that I've been told that decisions of the board are made independently from one case to the next and do not affect a decision on one case does not affect a decision on another case, although that does seem contrary to the concept of case law, which I've also heard cited. In any case, I am extremely sympathetic to what the applicants have gone through here. I am very impressed with, I've known Catherine in the past. She's great. I highly recommend her as a neighbor and friend. And just looking at these structures, I think it should be clear to you that if you're deciding whether this thing is a backyard cottage or an outbuilding, it's a backyard cottage that has a pre-existing nonconformity. It doesn't make sense to be considering such issues as setbacks when you're trying to determine the building type. Those are issues that relate to nonconformities and not the type of the building. The fact that this building is actually 28 feet tall, as noted in the staff report, as opposed to the 12-foot maximum for an outbuilding, makes it pretty clear that this is not an outbuilding. If I think of an outbuilding, I think of an outhouse, frankly. So in my mind, it's clear this is a backyard cottage, and you should decide that way just based on the logical classification of the building. So thanks for taking that into consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else? Emily?
Madam Chair, this is Emily Hutchings again. I do not see any other hands raised at this time. Oh, I take that back. I saw one hand that was raised. speaking directly to the public through you, Madam Chair. If you
Yes.
would like to speak, please keep your hand raised. So I know you would like to speak. I do not see any other hands raised at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay. It's going to shift over to the, right now, leave that open to the board. Some of you heard the presentation live both times, and others have signed on and signed the affidavits that you heard what happened at the last meeting. What do we have for questions for the applicant? Oh, I'm sorry, Miss Sarah, yes.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could through you, make a few clarifications regarding the case.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I did want to address a few things from Attorney Dash's statement and clarify a few points. So one of the items that came up was that the staff report does not address essentially the age of the structure, the historic nature of the structure. And that is because with this administrative appeal, we cannot. Whether or not this is a historic building, whether or not it was built in 1900 or 2000 or 1750, that is not something for the board to consider. The only thing that the board can consider is whether or not the existing structure meets the classifications, meets the dimensions for a backyard cottage and what have you, or whether it meets the criteria for an outbuilding. So that is why that is not addressed. It has no bearing, and so the board cannot consider that. That is also why I did not consider it. Setbacks, to a point just made by the public, the part of what makes a building classification, the building type, what it is that not only is it, a certain floor plate, not only is it, so many stories tall, etc., but the setbacks are part of what allow it to be considered the type of building that goes hand in hand with whether or not it's 1.5 stories or 3 stories, etc. But the setbacks are part of what you need to consider. Now, that being said, to Mr. Dash's point, and as noted in the staff memo, there are nonconformities irrespective, whether this is considered an outbuilding or whether it's considered a backyard cottage. It has nonconformities. So the ZBA has to balance which, they have to look at that in balance, right? Because there's going to be nonconformities irrespective, whether it's building height, which is clearly way too tall, double the height of an outbuilding, or whether it's setbacks, which it doesn't meet for an outbuilding or a backyard cottage. So you're going to have to balance these two things together. Your determination on this property, your determination about this building does not set a precedence for all of the other backyard cottages, potential backyard cottages or outbuildings or conversion thereof throughout the city or throughout the NR zone. You will have to look at each item, each one of these buildings on an individual basis. Will there be a lot that, yes, do violate setbacks? Absolutely. Will there be some that don't? Yes, absolutely. But if you make this determination that it is a backyard cottage, that does not mean that all of the other ones very quickly get to become a backyard cottage. If you decide that this is an outbuilding and not a backyard cottage, that does not that does not then keep all of the other potential backyard cottages / outbuildings as an outbuilding. Each case is determined on its own merit. When it comes to how we look at the zoning code, yes, there is a lot of conversation about section 1.1.4 about equity balancing, regulations of real property, things such as environmental considerations, etc. And I know that those were heavily weighed, but those are not the only things you can consider. The zoning code must be looked at comprehensively. So you must look at dimensions and you must look at how each of these building types is regulated. You can also take into consideration things such as that, which is in section 1.1.4, but you cannot look at 1.1.4 to the exclusion of all of those other things, right? So, so you need to look at the dimensions. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up, and again, to the last speaker's point, was it is true that you cannot consider the future development of the site, whether or not this means that by allowing the conversion to a backyard cottage, it allows the person to stay in the city, or that they will have to move, or that it will be used as a residence, or that it will be used as a playroom. You can't consider that. The only thing you can consider is whether this is, which building type this actually is. The last thing, which I was going to send you a memo about, but then decided not to, is the use of photos in the zoning code. I've noted in a couple of staff memos that photos and illustrations are illustrative only. And when you look at the description of each zone and each building type in each zone, it specifically says, that they are illustrative. And at the outset of the zoning code, it specifically says photos and illustrations are illustrative only. It's a way of helping you understand, but but the ZBA cannot use a photo or illustration preferentially over what is written in the text. The text will always carry. And we asked the legal department for their opinion on this, and that is what they wrote to us this week as well. And I will pull that up really quickly. So the city solicitor wrote to us and said that the plain language of the zoning, when the plain language of the zoning ordinance is contrary to the anticipated argument and should control. So we assumed that there was going to be an argument made that look at the photos and, this building does or does not look like these photos. And the city solicitor has determined that photos do not carry the day, the text carries the day, and you can use photos and illustrations as a guide to help you understand, but not to base your decision on that. So I think, Madam Chair, through you, that is just about all.
Madam Chair, can I respond to that quickly? Yep, Adam Dash again. I would note that the age of this building is important because I believe pre-existing.
I have one question.
Sorry.
Adam, I didn't answer Adam. Adam?
Yes,
Adam?
you were frozen there for a second.
Hello?
Yes.
Before you speak, I want to ask, I lost Sarah. Yeah, I lost Sarah. Did everybody else, were they able to hear her, or was that only me?
We heard her.
Did you hear Sarah's complete?
Yes.
Good. Okay, great. And make sure they heard, that's all. Thank you.
Madam Chair, would you like me to
Go ahead.
repeat, or are you okay?
Yes? No, I'm okay. I'm
Okay.
okay. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Adam, I'm sorry, I apologize, Adam. Please go ahead.
All right, thank you. I would note that the age is important to the building and the historic nature because the pre-existing nature of it is crucial. And the purpose of the Somerville zoning ordinance does say about balancing the nature and character of the city. So I don't think to say that you can't weigh that at all, I think is wrong. And to say this doesn't set precedent, I'll tell you it's going to set precedent because if this is denied after the Troll Street case was denied last time, I can tell you when clients come to me, I'm going to tell them you can't do it because 2 of these cases already got shot down. It's just going to be the way it goes. You could say it legally doesn't set precedent. It's going to practically set precedent because everyone's going to realize you have to tear these buildings down if you want to do anything, because you can't keep them. That I'm just being honest with you. I would note also that ISD, each case being taken separately, I would say ISD cannot randomly classify buildings and have all these buildings that are similarly situated and call one kind of type of building and one the other. There has to be some precedent consistency here. What I think the board needs to do is give inspectional services some guidance here on what to do with these buildings. ISD told us to either alter this to meet a backyard cottage, which would destroy the whole thing, or file an administrative appeal, which sort of I took as the hint to, please zoning board, help us decide what to do with these going forward, because this keeps coming up. And you saw it in Trull, which was a differently situated one. This, I think, is an easier case than that one. As far as the photos go, look, when they talk about if the city solicitor is talking about the plain text of the document, if only the document had plain text. The document does not have plain text. As a matter of fact, the definition of outbuilding and the definition of backyard cottage, I read you both, and they're pretty much identical. And then they lay out different dimensional requirements, neither of which this building meets. So I'm falling back on the pictures because it's the next best thing that we have here to try to determine what the intent of this Somerville zoning ordinance is. because when it's not clear, you have to look at the intent. The photos show the intent. Section 1.1.4 shows the intent. That's why those things are so important. I'm not saying you throw the rest of it out, but looking at the dimensions or the setbacks doesn't help because we're not meeting them in either case. And when both an outbuilding and a backyard cottage say that they're for home occupation, vehicle parking, residential use, playroom for children, I'm not exactly sure how that helps you. I would note the context in which outbuilding is listed among accessory structures like compost bin and chicken coop tells you the class of outbuilding that was probably being considered here, not a 28-foot tall structure. Something more, I think the outhouse that Mr. Porter was mentioning sounds more like outbuilding, or maybe like a kid's tree house or something, not this. So I would say it's another one of those situations, although I think this one actually is fairly straightforward. I think Mr. Porter hit the nail right on the head. I don't feel the need to actually repeat what he said here. I thought that was probably better stated than I did, that this is 28 feet tall. This is an entire building. If this were the only thing on the lot, it would be a house. I mean, it's big. It's real big. And you can say whatever my client's going to do going forward doesn't come into play, but I'm telling you what's going to go forward is this is going to get demolished because there's nothing else they can do if this is not considered a backyard cottage. So I would just say you can ignore these implications with, if you want, but there are big time real world implications to voting this down. Obviously do what you want. I think that this is really pretty clear cut, to be honest with you, that this is a backyard cottage. And I think everyone will be very relieved citywide to know that we can do something with these buildings under that context. And ISD will hear that from the board and they'll take that going forward. And I think that's the way it should go. Thanks.
Thank you. Emily Hutchins, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to note that we did have one more member of the public who wished to speak. I think there was some confusion with the raised hand function, so I apologize if that was on my part.
No problem. I felt that. That's why I didn't close it. I thought there was some confusion. Beautiful. Let's hear from them, please.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair. So I am unmuting Kathy Martin. Ms. Martin, you are unmuted and should be able to speak.
Oh, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Ms. Martin.
Oh,
Go ahead, please.
Hi. That's great. I have a very simple comment. I was actually at the last meeting, and I think at the very first one when they were first planning and zoning was first considering the overall remodeling of the house, the main house. I live at 32 Hall Ave. I'm sort of catty corner. We go on our back deck and we see the structure. And I walk by, when I walk around the block, I see it. I mean, it would just be a real shame to have that structure destroyed. And yes, I understand there's all these rules and regulations about what's cottage, backyard cottage, whatever it is. But I just say don't destroy it. Just please, please, please try to keep it. It's just, part of the neighborhood. And I don't understand why something like that would be destroyed just because it doesn't fit in a particular box. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. All right. So now let's open it up to the board. As we go around here, who has some questions they'd like to ask of the applicant or the case manager on this? Sarah? Zachary Zaremba.
I had a question that maybe Ms. White can answer. Attorney Dash went through a list of the permitted accessory structures such as compost bin, construction trailer, etc. Is that applicable to the current designation of the building as an outbuilding type? Is that list that he read accurate? That that's the uses that could be used for that property as it stands?
So outbuilding, so I'm sorry, Madam Chair, through you. So,
Yes.
So we have principal building, accessory building, and accessory structure. And an outbuilding is one of many accessory structures among that list that he gave. So it's not that a chicken coop or a cold frame is a type of outbuilding. That is another type of accessory structure. And an outbuilding itself, I think I provided you the definitions of it in the staff report. That is And each one of those things, a chicken coop, a cold frame, et cetera, has different criteria for it. And what I provided you was a criteria for an outbuilding itself. So an outbuilding is one type of accessory structure, just as a chicken coop, a cold frame, an outhouse, if you will, is another type of accessory structure.
Okay, I
Thank
just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
you, Stacker. Is there anyone else here?
Well, Madam Chair,
No, okay.
um,
Brian Cook, please.
through you to the staff, Sarah, does the definition of an outbuilding exclude placing a dwelling unit in it?
An outbuilding does not have a dwelling unit, correct?
But does the definition of an outbuilding exclude a dwelling unit?
So if you take a look at the code, the section of the code that I cited, what I provided you items, I think it's like 1 through 4, that is, if you will, the definition of an outbuilding. Those are the parameters of an outbuilding.
But it doesn't exclude the possibility of putting a dwelling unit in it.
Accessories, so an outbuilding is a type of accessory structure. So if you look, so the hierarchy is principal building, accessory building, accessory structure. And an accessory structure does not allow a dwelling unit, but a principal building and an accessory building do allow dwelling units.
Okay. But an outbuilding
Outbuilding accessory structure.
allows a home office. Is that correct?
Yes, but that is not but a dwelling unit, it does not.
Yep. So you would understand the confusion somebody might have, which is pointed out by the attorney representative of the appellant, that there's an overlap in uses between an outbuilding that's an accessory structure and a backyard cottage that's an accessory building. There's an overlap.
Yes and no. There is no overlap for a dwelling unit.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so partially.
That's our difference. That's our difference.
Because all accessory structures are excluded from the possibility of a resident as a
That is
dwelling unit.
correct. That is correct.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Ian or Cecilia, any comments?
Madam Chair, I mean, I feel that I'm ready for it to be a backyard cottage.
And yeah,
I don't, even looking at it before the code change, the site plan review also said, why are you here? And I know we're getting caught in all this legal, and I've, looked up the ordinance. I mean, for a outbuilding, it's huge, right? It makes sense that it could be an oversized backyard cottage, therefore allowing dwelling because it's so big. And I know, Sarah, I mean, I do hear when you say, don't consider that. I think that's the problem, right? I think if we look at each code so narrowly, there are gaps, and we are here to use our judgment with, again, some revision, building fabric, preserving neighborhood, all of these as well. So I don't think we can exclude all those things. I don't think we can narrowly look at each dimension. We do consider it, but I think the board is here to use their judgment overall. And so there is an interpretation, and that's what we're tasked to do. And to me, it's a backyard cottage. To me, that's clear.
okay, thank you.
Actually,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, who's speaking? Go ahead.
I don't know why ISD said it's an outbuilding. They looked at the plan. I mean, the plan is submitted for permit. The permit shows a dwelling unit, and they said, no, I don't understand how that happened.
Oh, sorry, Madam Chair, if I may, through you.
Yep.
So there is no dwelling unit in that building right now.
Correct, but why, when did ISD, I thought they were presented with a permit. Did I read somewhere?
So, Madam Chair, if I may, through you. So yes, they were. So there was a filing for a building permit in order to, renovate the building and establish a backyard cottage. Well, the assumption, see, now I'm getting caught up. So the assumption was that it already was a backyard cottage, so therefore they could just proceed with their project. And so, yes, so when ISD looked at the building, they said it's not a backyard cottage already, it's an outbuilding. They have to classify all buildings at some point. And so they said, no, it meets the criteria of an outbuilding as opposed to a backyard cottage. For dimensional reasons, for use reasons, etc. Beyond that, I can't go really any further because it's just a determination that they made. So yeah, so despite what the intent was, to establish a household living use in that building, ISD determined that, well, it's not a building that you can actually just convert to a backyard cottage by right, because in fact it's not a backyard cottage. I know it's slicing and dicing, but yes, this is the building type classification challenge, I think, with some of these buildings. And so because they determined that in fact they didn't have a backyard cottage already, they could not actually create a dwelling unit in that building. Now, I also wanted to clarify too, from a staff perspective, one of the reasons why you don't have a recommendation here is like, I think there's a struggle, right? There's a struggle either way. And that is exactly why the staff report is written precisely the way it is, right? There are a lot of nonconformities with this building as an outbuilding. There are a lot of nonconformities with this building as a backyard cottage, right? So, and this is not like, oh, gee, staff is conceding that, this defeat isn't even the right word. Like, we have no stake in the game. Our only job is to simply present the information we have from legal, the information we have from ISD, and what the code says. And so that's why you have what you have. The really, really challenging parts in your hands. And I'm sorry, Ms. Brockelman, I interrupted you.
No, so, again, tons of old properties in the city. So it was just filing to get this classification formally recognized somewhere, right?
Madam Chair, through you, if I understand correctly, yes, this will, if you were to vote that this is, if you were to vote in the affirmative, in agreement with the applicant that yes, this is a backyard cottage, then that just is what it is. The building classification then automatically changes because of your decision. And then it changes in ISD's classification records. It doesn't change all other structures like this in the city. It's only this one. And so then what that does is it resets the table, or it resets the playing field for the applicant, right, to move forward. And sorry, there was one other thing I was going to add on to that. So if you were to vote in the affirmative with the applicant, then you would be voting to deny the building official's decision and affirm that this building is already a backyard cottage.
Yes.
If that's what you wanted to go. Yeah.
You're therefore overturning the ISD determination.
That is correct.
We don't always disagree, and I do with ISD. Often we agree with ISD in more cases, and I do appreciate staff's due diligence, slicing and dicing all the little dimensional, things. But I think in the end, again, it's the spirit of the ordinance. It can't capture every dimensional irregularity in the city's historic fabric. So we are here to make a judgment call. So I've given where my vote will And I'll yield.
And Madam Chair, if I could through you, if that is, in either way that you do your vote, whichever that is, you'll need to justify exactly why you believe that it is already a backyard cottage. And I would recommend that you also pull on dimensional criteria as well, because that will help you render a defensible decision.
Okay. I'm leaving this open because I can see everybody's thinking. I want to just say one thing as well. All the years I've served on the board, I've always felt that we as the board were to use our interpretation, as Ann was saying, or our feelings of, how these cases should go. I think that's why we're here. Everything that comes up, be it a special permit or site plan review or any of those things, really, with the exception of a variance, we look at it, we read it, we go out to the site, we see what they're talking about, and we're the wiggle room, so to speak. We're the gray area, if there's such a thing allowed at certain cases there are. Some are very black and white. Some are just, it's there. I agree that I like that we have the room tonight to say that this is one case. And it's not going to set a precedent. If we have others come to us, each one would be judged on its own merits and testimony and facts. There's also, I agree with what Sarah said a little earlier about there's no pointing fingers. This is one big team, and I've never, cared about who said what, who or when. I get the information in front of me to make the call. That's, you read the rules, you listen to testimony, you do it again. And just sometimes you don't agree with certain people. It's your interpretation. And that's why we have 5 people and they need 4. I was a little concerned, and I usually, I think inspectional services does an outstanding job. The quantity of properties in this city and the way everybody's built on top of each other, different neighborhoods, main drags, whatever, I think they do an outstanding job. I think this case came up with everything happening. If you look at the dates, like Mr. Dash brought up earlier, and I made a copy of it last week. I kept it, and I know I missed a couple of things. I mean, this goes way back. We're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with new zoning still. We're dealing with all different kinds of people and working together. And I just think it's been an unfortunate chain of events. I don't know. I looked at the dimensions, and I have I know about the 2040. You take all these things these are all the things we have to weigh in. I don't know how the rest of the board's feeling, whether Brian or Cece or Zach. Are you ready to vote tonight? Yes? Okay. I think Ann's ready to vote tonight. Ann, you ready to vote tonight? Okay. However you vote, when we make our presentation, just like Sarah said, we have got to justify and explain what we're doing, whether it's for or against. So, think about how you can add something to this. I think we should put it in the form of an approval. See something here. To approve the administrative appeal. And we should have the criteria in that motion. And then those who don't agree would vote nay. Is planning staff, Emily, could come on board, please?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Hi. It looks like the board's ready to vote tonight. They don't need any more time. My suggestion, I'm sure you were listening, was to make the motion in the affirmative with the applicants for the administrative appeal to approve their administrative appeal. And as Sarah mentioned in our our motion, we should say why we feel it should go this way. Is that right? Is that what I understood, Sarah? Yep. Emily? Okay. So I'm going to ask the board to speak up about this right now, and I'm going to ask you if you could make some notes for us and give Ann a hand when she makes the presentation. All right. And anybody who wants to vote, it's going to be yay for the affirmative. It's going to be nay for the against. And Brian Cook, you have your fingers up. What's up? What you got?
I just want to suggest two possible reasons to support a vote in favor.
Yeah.
One, the building dimensions are closer to a backyard cottage than they are to an outbuilding. Secondly, the placement of the outbuilding definition among all those other structures as accessory structures does not match the building's character. So there's a gap in the ordinance because it defines what an accessory building is. If you go all the way back to the definitions, there's a definition of an accessory building. There's no definition of an accessory structure. So we are left with trying to determine whether this in fact fits the definition of something that's not defined, except by the itemized examples or the specifics that are in the code. And I don't find that any of those match what this building represents, whether it was a horse barn or a carriage house, what everything else. It's just not of the character of the things that are imagined or expected in the code to be accessory structures. So again, to simplify it, one, I think the dimensions of the building are closer to a backyard cottage, even though the setback requirements still are in violation of the code.
Yeah.
And I think the nature of the building as a whole does not match an accessory structure.
Okay, that's you, Brian. Does anybody else have something they felt strong or motivated on that they want to mention? Ann, do you, Ann Brockelman?
I agree. I think, as Brian says, I would put, in this case, character above the exact dimensional nonconformity, because we know lots of buildings in Somerville, and that is part of the character of the city, are grossly nonconforming in dimension, and I don't find that violation huge. You know, it required is 3, but it's 110. I think in the grand scheme of things, that's not a huge nonconformity.
Okay, thank you. They're all set, Zachary, with those suggestions? And Cecia?
I would say the preservation of a building, if indeed that's going to be done during the renovation, is, would be preferable.
Mhm.
That the zoning ordinance in this case almost makes it a little bit nonsensical to knock something down to make something smaller. So I would offer that. Although practically speaking, in converting something like this into a conditioned building probably requires essentially rebuilding it. But anyways, the preservation aspect I think is influential as well.
Okay, thank you. Sarah White, you had your hand up, hon?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, through you, if I could just get a clarification on that last point, Ms. Daglian, when you talk about preservation, you're not talking about historic preservation, you're talking about retaining a structure as
Correct.
opposed to adding it to the waste stream. Going
Correct.
to that sustainability component of the ordinance. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because preservation gets used in a bunch of different ways, and I want to make sure
Right.
we're using it in a way we can.
Right.
Thank you.
All right. Emily?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. I think you're asking me to review the notes, but I think you froze.
Here.
Madam Chair, I think you might be back.
Okay, thank you.
Would you mind repeating your question to me?
My question was, had you gotten all that? So when Ann makes the presentation, we can just refer to what has just been spoken, and that the staff person, Emily, tonight, the planner, is taking the notes and will be putting that on.
Yes, Madam Chair. If I understand it correctly, through you, the motion that you're looking to see is to approve the administrative appeal on the basis of the character of the building more closely resembling an accessory building, particularly a backyard cottage, rather than an accessory structure. And that the character of the building as a whole does not sufficiently match the definition of an accessory structure. And that the building dimensions are more appropriate to those of a backyard cottage or accessory building rather than an accessory structure.
And also the preserving of this type of building, not necessarily like Sarah, broadly preserved. It's just that she feels that structures of that nature. And Sarah, you have your hand up, please, Sarah White.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. If through you, if I could just add one more thing, I would specifically say that you are making a motion to approve the administrative appeal that the structure is a backyard cottage and overturn the building official's prior determination that the building was an accessory structure outbuilding. So I would specifically say you're overturning the building official's classification.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at Ann Brockman. She's going, yes. Good. All right, Ann. All right, Emily, does anybody else have anything? So number one, I want to close the public portion of this case. It's just the 23 Francesca. And we're going to open it to Ann Brockelman, who is who's our vice chair, and she's acting for our clerk this evening, to make a motion.
Yes, Madam
Ann,
Chair.
go ahead.
In the matter of 21 Francesca Avenue, P&Z case 23-001, I seek a motion to approve the administrative appeal, which is to overturn ISD's determination of this building as an accessory structure, thereby designating it a backyard cottage.
Everybody's shaking their heads. The wording okay, everybody? Okay. May I have a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Brian Cook. So all in favor of the motion to say aye. Brian Cook,
Aye.
Zachary Zaremba,
Aye.
Cecilia Daglian,
Aye.
Ann Brockelman,
Aye.
and Susan Fontano, aye. Let the record show it was unanimous. to approve the applicant's administrative appeal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of
All
the
right.
board, for this. Sorry to keep bringing you difficult ones, but sort of what I do. So
Hey, we
good to
can
see
take
you.
it. We can take it. Thank you, Mr. Dash.
No,
Thank you. Good luck, Mr. Zepeda.
Thank you so much.
Okay. There's nothing else I don't feel on, there's nothing else here. Let's see here. I want to double check my stuff. There's no other business on the agenda tonight listed. Does anybody have something they want to say? No? Okay. Well, I thank everybody. I especially thank Sarah White for unscrambling this egg for us. And I wish the Zepedas good luck with their project. Emily, thank you so much for guiding us on how we do the right thing, because we're trying to do our best. And for all you folks, thank you for your participation tonight, your questions, your comments. They're all needed for us to all think about it and make some nice decisions here. So I say good night. May I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Yes, I see.
moved.
Thecia makes a motion, we adjourn. All in favor? I'll go around the board. Brian Cook.
I second it, and aye.
Okay, both of you. Thank double trouble. I'm in trouble here tonight. Zachary
Aye.
and I don't know if I go out. Cece is
Aye.
aye,
Yeah.
and Susan Fontano aye. Let the record show we can all go home now. Thank you. Good
Thank
night.
you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.